Hello, this is Akram Jaffar, and in this session, I'm going to deal with the histology of the endocrine system. Let's start with the pituitary gland. You can see here that the pituitary gland is suspended by a stalk, or called the infundibulum, and it is divided into two parts, an anterior pituitary and a posterior pituitary. The anterior pituitary is called the adenohypophysis, and the posterior pituitary is called the neurohypophysis because it is in continuity with the hypothalamus. In fact, the hypothalamus controls both lobes of the pituitary gland, but the way that it controls them is different. The anterior pituitary is controlled via neurohormones that are transmitted in a portal venous circulation. Regarding the posterior pituitary, it is the axons of neurons that are located in the hypothalamus that end in the posterior pituitary and release the hormones. So the posterior pituitary is in direct continuity with the hypothalamus by the infundibulum. And also you can see that most of the gland is in fact anterior pituitary gland. About 75% of the gland is the adenohypophysis. The adenohypophysis secretes multiple hormones, 7 hormones actually. There are different types of cells that secrete them. In fact, they are synthesized by 5 types of cells, but the problem is that we cannot differentiate between these 5 types of cells using the conventional histological stains. We can only differentiate between them by using special immunohistochemical stains. And the posterior pituitary, in fact, it releases 2 hormones. These hormones are not produced by the posterior pituitary, but they are transmitted by axons from cell bodies that are located in the hypothalamus, and there are 2 hormones. So the anterior pituitary, it secretes the growth hormone, and it secretes the thyroid stimulating hormone that acts on the thyroid gland. It secretes ACTH that acts on the adrenal gland, and it secretes gonadotropes, the follicular stimulating hormone and luteinizing hormone that act on the testis and ovary. It also secretes the prolactin that acts on the breast, also the melanocyte stimulating hormone. So 7 types of hormones secreted by 5 types of cells, and then the posterior pituitary secretes these 2 hormones, the antidiuretic and oxytocin. This is a section in the adenohypophysis or the anterior pituitary, and you can see here that there is connective tissue, strands of connective tissue, pinkish in color, like a network, and these are continuous with the fibrous capsule of the gland. And between the glandular tissue, there are cells as well as the blood vessels, the capillaries, large capillaries and blood vessels. They are present everywhere. You can see the RBCs inside them. So they are of the type of sinusoidal capillaries, large capillaries with fenestrated endothelium and fenestrated basement membrane. And you will appreciate that in endocrine glands, which secrete into the blood, you will need a very good vascular bed. So that's why endocrine glands in general are highly vascular. If you look at this stain with a higher magnification, you can differentiate 3 types of cells. This is a conventional stain, not an immunohistochemical stain. So although we have 5 types of cells, but we can only see here 3 types of cells. So on the basis of staining properties, some of these cells, they do not take the stain, so they are called chromophobes, and you can see here that they are not stained. And there are other cells that are bluish in color, so they take basophilic stains, and so they are basophils, like this one. This one is a basophil. And there are other types of cells which are called acidophils, so they take acidic dyes, and that's why they are called the acidophils. So 3 types of cells. Also, you can see the network of connective tissue and the blood vessels that are present everywhere. This is a section in the neurohypophysis, and you can see that there are also large blood vessels here. Most of the background is composed of axons. These are the axons of secretory neurons whose cell bodies are located in the hypothalamus. If we see a nucleus here, for example, this one, then these are called pituicytes, and they are the glial cells that support the axons. There are no secretory cells here. The secretory cells, as I said, are present in the hypothalamus. This is to show you the nuclei in the hypothalamus that secretes the two hormones, and the two hormones, they pass through the hypothalamo-hypophyseal tract, which pass through the infundibulum, and they are released from the posterior pituitary. They include the oxytocin, and this will cause contraction of the smooth muscle in the wall of the uterus, and also it will cause the contraction of the myoepithelial cells that surround the acini of the breast and cause the ejection of the milk. This hormone causes ejection of milk, not the secretion of milk. The secretion of milk is induced by the prolactin, which is secreted from the anterior pituitary gland. The other hormone is the antidiuretic hormone, and as its name indicates, it acts on the collecting tubules of the kidney and causes reabsorption of water from the collecting tubules, and also it causes contraction of smooth muscle fibers that are present in the wall of blood vessels, hence the name vasopressin, which is the alternative name of antidiuretic hormone. Now let's move to another gland. This is the thyroid gland, and you can see that the functional unit here is the thyroid follicles, multiple of these. They are lined by simple cuboidal epithelium, very typical, characterized by cuboidal cells with a rounded nucleus, and the follicles, they are filled with a homogeneous material called the colloid, where it stores the T3 and T4. Actually, these hormones are stored outside the cell, and whenever they are required, they will be uptaken by the cells and secreted into the blood vessels that are present in the interstitial areas around the thyroid follicles. This is another section with another stain. You can see the thyroid follicles, the colloid, homogeneous colloid material. And note here that some of the follicles, they have pale scalloped edges. This indicates an active follicle. The colloid has been removed from the lumen of the follicle and will be soon replaced. Please note that the thyroid gland not only contains follicular cells that secrete the thyroid hormones, but also contains other cells which are called parafollicular cells, or we call them C cells. C cells because they secrete the hormone calcitonin, and parafollicular cells because they are either present in between the follicular cells or they are present in the tissue around the follicular cells. They are larger and paler than the follicular cells, not easily differentiated when they are present in the follicle, but we can say that these are parafollicular cells if they are present in the connective tissue around. They have different embryological origin than the follicular cells, and as I said, they secrete the calcitonin. The name of the hormone indicates that it controls the level of calcium. When the level of calcium in the blood is high, calcitonin will inhibit the osteoclastic activity, and this is actually the role of this hormone is opposite to the role of the hormone of the parathyroid gland. So this will take us to the other gland, that is the parathyroid gland, and as the name of the gland indicates, parathyroid means it is very close to the thyroid gland. That's why in this section we can see that there's thyroid tissue here. Look at the follicles with the homogeneous colloid inside them, and very close is the parathyroid gland, another gland which has different features or different architecture than the thyroid gland, totally different. And as you can see that they are both embedded in this fascia, which is called the pretracheal fascia, one of the deep fascias of the neck. So the parathyroid gland, actually there are 4 parathyroid glands, 2 pairs, superior pair and inferior parathyroid glands. They are embedded in the fascia posterior to the thyroid gland. This is a higher magnification in the parathyroid gland, and you can see large blood vessels, feature of all endocrine glands. They have a lot of blood vessels because they secrete to the blood, and most of the cells, in fact, they are called chief cells or principal cells, most of them, and they secrete the parathyroid hormone, which increases the level of calcium in the blood, the opposite of the calcitonin. The other cells which can be seen here are these large eosinophilic cells. So we can see clusters of these cells, large eosinophilic cells called oxyphil cells, and they do not secrete a hormone. Their function is not clear. So the parathyroid gland is not controlled by the pituitary gland, unlike the thyroid gland. The other gland here is the adrenal gland. This gland consists of two parts, consists of a cortex, this is the cortex, and a medulla inside it. The other name is called suprarenal gland. Most of the gland is a cortex, as you can see here. They have different embryological origin, the cortex and medulla. They secrete different hormones, but they are in close proximity to each other. In fact, the medulla, the cells that are present in the adrenal medulla, they resemble the cells of the autonomic nervous system, and they secrete catecholamines, adrenaline and noradrenaline. Let's start with the adrenal cortex. The adrenal cortex can be subdivided into three regions or three zones. So the most superficial region is called the zona glomerulosa, indicated here by the letter G, and the reason is that the cells in the zona glomerulosa, they assemble together in the form of like glomeruli, rounded formations. So the name is derived from the arrangement of the secretory cells. And then the other zone is the fasciculata, zona fasciculata. You can see the cells, they are arranged like longitudinal fascicles. That's why it's called zona fasciculata. And then the deepest zone of the adrenal cortex is called the zona reticularis, indicated by the R. And because here the cells, they will form like a reticulum, like a network. Okay, the arrangement is like a network. That's the origin of the naming of the zones of the suprarenal gland cortex. And each one of these zones is specialized in secretion of a different hormone. So the zona glomerulosa secretes the mineralocorticoids, like the aldosterone, and these control the level of the salts in the body. And then the zona fasciculata, which are controlled by the ACTH from the adenohypophysis, they secrete the glucocorticoids like cortisol, and they control the level of sugars in the blood. And then the zona reticularis, they secrete the sex steroids like androgens, so they control the sex. And so you can see that these three zones, they control what we call the three S's in the body: the salt, the sugar, and the sex. And as a mnemonic for them, the zona glomerulosa, G, fasciculata, F, reticularis, R, together GFR, if you remember the glomerular filtration rate, so GFR. Now let's deal with the medulla, and this is a special stain, in fact, which shows RBCs to appear black in color. So we can see a lot of RBCs here in the cortex. Look at these sinusoidal capillaries in the cortex, longitudinally arranged. And then there are a lot of sinusoidal capillaries in the medulla as well. And the cells of the medulla form clusters, and they secrete catecholamine hormones, adrenaline and noradrenaline, or epinephrine and norepinephrine. This is to give you an idea about how these cells in the adrenal medulla are controlled. In fact, these cells of the adrenal medulla, they receive sympathetic fibers. These are preganglionic sympathetic fibers. They have not synapse in the sympathetic trunk. They do not synapse in paravertebral ganglia like the celiac ganglion, like all other preganglionic sympathetic fibers that supply the gut, they synapse there. But these axons, they pass without synapsing. So they are still preganglionic when they reach the adrenal medulla. And the cells in the adrenal medulla will act, therefore, like postganglionic neurons of the sympathetic nervous system, and they secrete adrenaline and noradrenaline as a neurotransmitter, but it will be secreted in the blood and will act like a hormone. This concludes our study of the histology of the endocrine system.